Hi, welcome to a special edition of Education Matters. This is a series in which we'll look at some veteran board members who have served on their boards of education for 35 or more years. We're calling it 2 centuries of service to students and the community. With me for this interview are 2 people that I've known since I've been with the association, which is relatively new to them because it's only been 24 years. But they've been on for 35 and 48 years. And so I'd like to welcome Rona McNabola from the Glen board. Welcome, Rona.
Hi, Ray. It's always good to see you.
It's always good to see you. Eleanore Shaffer from 2 boards. She serves on 2 boards. So where are you from? What boards are you on?
On 2 boards serving in Sussex County. One is a regional board district, which comprises of 5 districts, 7 to 12. And the other is the ascending district, which is pre-K handicap to 6th grade elementary school in Sussex County.
Like I said, I've known both of these women for a long time, and they're very dedicated servants. Rona, I'll start with you. Why did you run for the board? But actually, tell us a little bit about Glen Rock, what type of district it is. Eleanor told us about her districts.
Well, I guess I first ran for the board in 1985. And our district at that time was 1,800 students in 3 elementary schools, a junior high and a senior high. Right now, we'll call it 2022. It's 2,600 students in 4 elementary buildings, a middle school and a senior high. So the size of the district has gotten very big. We've had 3 referendums in our district. Luckily, they've all passed right now. And it's made a big difference in the size of the district and the types of classes we can offer in the schools.
And Rona, why did you run for the board back in 1985?
The reason I ran for the board was to find out what went on in closed session. That was my main reason. I used to go to the board meetings. They used to come out of closed session. They used to take a vote, and I used to sit there and say, so what did they really talk about? And when I told people that at the meetings, they said, yeah, what do they talk about? And I got elected. So unfortunately, that was somewhat of an agenda, and you really can't come on a board with an agenda like that. So it became very interesting to tell people that there are certain things you can't talk about when you are on the school board.
Yeah, that's one of the first things you kind of learn pretty quickly.
Yes.
Eleanor, your board, are you an original member of the board, the Kittatinny board?
No, I came on a little bit later. I'm original, started with the elementary school and then bridged over to the high school.
Oh, you graduated.
Mine's a little bit of a longer story of why I got on the board. I had attended a number of meetings, again, in the mid-70s, 1970. And what was happening was these new, supposedly new, innovative, creative programs. And I attended the board meetings, asked questions, researched what they were doing, but not satisfied with the responses that I was getting. And it was like programs that they were trying to push without explanation. So I said, okay, let me get on the board to see what really is happening.
And now I know both of you will, I'll go to Rona again first on this one. It's one reason to run for the board. It's another thing once you sit at the board dais and you have to start making decisions and having influence on those conversations. What's the biggest challenge for being an individual board member, Rona?
Well, I think really the biggest challenge is finding out where the finances go. It's nothing that I thought about when I was running for the board that you had to find out about the finances. Remembering when we ran, the town voted on our budgets all the time. And so we had to go and fight for what the finances were. So when we wanted to change something, kind of like what Eleanor wanted to do, we had to make sure that the money was there for the kids. because that's what we were there for, was for the kids. And then we had to communicate to the parents that whatever we were doing wasn't going to happen right away. It was just the beginning of the process. So telling people that the finances were going to help, maybe not even their children, maybe their grandchildren in the future. That was the hardest thing, to try to communicate that as a board to the rest of the town.
And what about you, Eleanor? What was maybe the biggest challenge that you found as a board member?
I don't know whether I looked at them as challenges, but situations that had to be discussed and closure come to them and to finalize what the problem is. I'm not saying that there haven't been many challenging years, there have been, but from the initiation of my being on the board member to the current time, and Rona hit it right on the head, is it's always been finances. And then you get to learn very quickly the domino effect of the having finances and not having finances, and how that dominoes right through your whole curricular areas. I always went in with my purpose of being there is for the student. The adults, okay, adults will have to learn to take care of themselves. I'm here to make sure that students have the education that they deserve, that they can be productive citizens, that they have the curricular activities, they have the technology aware for all, and to able to have life skills to be productive citizens. I do have to say that I'm fortunate being on two boards, and the teamwork of these board members has always been the focus of the student. And that's how really getting things done is. Always remember the most important part of this puzzle is the student.
Eleanor, you touch on it a little bit. You come on as an individual, but you have to work with a team. You have to work with other people, whether it's 7 or 9 members. What makes an effective board member? How do you become effective at being in that role as a board member? Rona?
Oh, okay. My board is a 9-member board. And I think the most important thing that a new board member has to do when they come on is have the ability to ask the questions, and to ask the questions at the proper time. You don't ask the questions at a board meeting. You don't bring up questions that people never heard about. So you have to be able to speak to your superintendent and speak to your board president. And sometimes, now that I'm a long-term member on my board, they call me up. My big thing over the years has been policy. So if they have a question on policy, they often call me up and ask me the questions ahead of time. So when you get to a board meeting, you're really always on the same topic. You're not bringing up questions that should be answered behind the scenes. I think that's an important thing for board members to remember.
Yeah. Eleanor, what about you? Who do you think makes you effective, a board member effective?
Okay. The organization and construct of the board. People having a mutual focus, and again, I can't stress enough, the focus is always the student. If you have some political agenda, you leave it at the door. Being at a board member, it has no place whatsoever for any political agenda. And if you start that, you're going to find out how tough being a board member is, because other board members that have been around are not going to accept that. The organization of a board with a common construct here, I've always gone in with the premise that I do not have any relatives and I do not have any friends when I'm on the Board of Education. And I keep saying that. People, they look at me like I got 2 heads, and I said, no, I really mean that. So you do not ask me for anything. Unless if you have a question, there are certain protocols that you go to get that question said. The board is really the last resort. If you have any kind of a question, go through the steps: teacher, administrator, superintendent, and then the board if you don't have an answer. So working together, having a common goal, I think is very, very important. And you leave the administrating to the administrator. That's not your purpose as a board member. You're not there to do any type of administration process to policies to the school. You're there as a policy making board. That's it. Know your place, know your function. And I can't stress enough the orientation to school boards and attending of as many workshops as you possibly can. That's how you learn the organization of the board. How are they doing this? We are a board of the whole. We find that works much better because when we were a committee structure, there were some board members that felt, listen, you are getting information that we're not getting.
Yeah.
And that's possible because how many times can a superintendent or anybody say again what they said at a committee meeting? And the tempo changes. So being a committee of the whole, we have 2 board meetings a month. One is a work session. Everybody gets the information at the same time, willing to discuss it. If you can come to closure, fine. But if not, then we come up with some type of an agenda, how we're going to get to the closure.
Okay,
It worked very well for us.
so you kind of explained a good teamwork. Ron, you have anything to add to that? The role, the relationship with the superintendent, or anything with the?
Yeah, well, the one thing I always want to think about is that I'm one person on a multi-person board. And until we sit as a board of a whole, we don't make any real decisions for the school district. So when I first got on the board, I had young children in the school, and you had people coming to you all the time and asking you questions, but you really couldn't answer them because you're not the whole board.
Communication is a very important tool to make you an effective board, effective
Yeah.
district throughout all this. Now, I started off by asking you why you ran for the board when you first decided to run, we'll say a couple of years ago. So, but now you've stayed on the board. I mean, you've been on these boards, Rona 35, Eleanor's over 45. I mean, that's a long time to be committed.
I started when I was very young, though. I was the youngest board member.
So why do you stay? Why did you stay on the board? Eleanor, I'll start this one with you. Why did you stay all these years on 2 boards too, for the most part?
Lately I've been asking myself that question quite often. And what I would say is there's no such thing as being in a vacuum. You solve one problem and immediately that vacuum becomes filled up again. And so when you have these problems and issues and some challenges, you say, I'm not going to run away from them. I'm in it for the long haul. I know better times are coming. I hope I'm around when they happen, but, and I don't want to say my ego gets in the way, but I'm not going to give up. And I'm going to keep going until we meet the goal. Finance is a base, but but the COVID has really changed the whole way of how we approach education.
Well, part of it is very true. Every time it comes up, every 3 years, in my mind, I say, over the next 3 years, either we're picking a superintendent, or we're doing a referendum, or we're doing a change in the curriculum. And I always say I have a passion for the schools. I was a teacher before I had my children, so I have always been very interested in schoolwork to begin with. And I just want to be there. In my district, a lot of board members who spent some time on the board did not get reelected over and over again. I think the longest term right now we have is somebody who was just elected for their 3rd term on the board. Everybody else is brand new on my board. And I always feel that, and I think Eleanor said, it has nothing to do with my ego. I'm not there to help all the other people that are there. But I just think that I have something that has to be said. And I have a lot of friends who say, you got to run for the board. You got to run for the board. So I've been running for the board on and on. And it's been a pleasure each time.
You've both been on a long time. What's the biggest change that you have seen from your role as a board member or in the schools, COVID aside, because Eleanor touched on, I mean, I couldn't have imagined that.
Yeah.
But any other change, or is COVID just the biggest challenge you've seen? Rona, I'll start with you on this one.
I think the parents are more interested than they were when I went to school. I think back when my own parents were in school, they never came to the school. They never asked questions of the school. The school did what they were supposed to do, and the parents did what they were supposed to do. Nowadays, the parents are very much involved in what's going on in the school, raising money for things that are going on in the school, asking the questions. So I think communicating with the parents are much more involved today than in the beginning.
What I see happening in the past few months is the type of parents coming to the board. I never thought it would happen in our rural little area here, where vocal parents don't throw me. If you got something to say and you're concerned about your students, I'm here to listen to you. And if we can help you, we'll do it. But the demands are such that when they start throwing at you to be civil disobedient, and I'm saying, wait a minute, you cannot have civil disobedience within this structure. If a mandate comes down from Trenton, and whatever that may be, whether I agree with it or whether I disagree with it, the vaccine, the mask wearing, the social distancing, the booster, whatever it may be, my feelings do not mean anything. But if that's the mandate, that's what we do.
Both of you have been on a long time, and I think both of you kind of alluded to it. Is having a long-time board member an asset to the board to a certain degree, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge. You may know, and Rona, you mentioned it, about policy. Well, this is the reason we have this policy. Do you think that's an asset to the board to have a board member who has a long-term service? Doesn't have to be as long as the two of you, but someone who has some service in the district and can reflect back on the history. Eleanor, I'll start with you on that one. Do you think it's an asset to the board?
I think it can be, but it also could be detrimental in that it's the type of person that is in that position. I think if you're in being a board member and you have a hidden agenda, that's not going to work. Just you can be a long-term board member, and I don't see how you are being positive and working and helping students to achieve their close to their potential. So that if you have the trust of the board, the trust of the staff and students, and trust of the parents and the community, that is extremely helpful and preserving your right to serve on the board as a longstanding time.
Rona, what about you? Do you think that has some value to the board, having someone long-term there?
Yeah, I think it allows like I say, especially with policy and especially with things that have gone on in your district in the past. If you don't have a superintendent that's been there 20 years, and I don't know if we still have superintendents who've been around for 20 years, but if you've had superintendents that come and go, sometimes bringing up things that happened before is very important, because it tells the rest of the board there that we've done that, it doesn't work, or we tried it. We recently, and I'll give you an example, in Glen Rock, we eliminated the principal of the middle school and made the principal of the high school the principal of both schools. The building that in our Glad Rock, it's in one building. And a lot of people got very shaky. And I didn't express it right away. And I said, you know, that's the way it used to be. We used to have a single principal here and a single principal there when it was a middle school, but when it was a junior high, senior high, it was one principal for the two schools. And everybody kind of calmed down a little because they knew that that had existed in Glen Rock. So sometimes it just pays to just listen to what everybody has spoken about. I also think that it helps as a long-term board member to keep my mouth shut a lot of times.
Right.
And just listen to what some of the board members have to say. And if I have something to add that helps, then I'll open my mouth and think, you know, in a board of 9 people, everybody should be able to speak about what's going on in the schools. And I think that's very important.
Someone wants to run for board, or they just get elected to the board, not your board. They come up to you for some advice on how they should what they should do in their first couple of years to be effective. Rona, what would you tell them?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. We had a new person, not tonight, because we're having 2 new people on our board, but last time, and she came to the board and she said, I really don't know too much of the board. I'm just going to listen for a while. I'm paying attention to what's going on, but I'm going to listen, as opposed to somebody coming on and again with an agenda and being able to speak about things that they really aren't familiar with. And I think that that's really important, is that a new person learns to listen. I think we call it active listening. You understand what everybody has to say, and then you don't need to repeat what somebody has said, but you pay attention to what has been said. And as the year went on with this one person, she became more and more active because she understood what the board was doing. And she asked the right questions and so on. So I think if you're new to the board, I think you should be quiet for a little while.
I agree. I agree with Rona. I would just add that always have the site and telephone number of your NJSBA rep. Ask questions, regardless if you think they're silly or redundant or not important. Ask them, because that's how you learn. Attend any and all orientation meetings, as well as all workshops if you possibly can. Again, see how your board functions. What's the organizational structure of the board? How do they work together? How do board members react to one another? Does the board all vote commonly as one, or do you have sometimes mixed vote? So take that all into consideration. Take notes and not expect immediate changes, because that's not going to happen. You know, it takes between, I think, a year to 18 months before you get full cycle of all the situations that occur on the board. So know your people, know how they work, and be honest in what you do.
Oh, thank you. Great piece of advice from both of you. I'd like to thank both Rona and Eleanor for joining me. I on behalf of New Jersey School Board Association, I'd like to thank you for your, let me see, I'm putting yours together, over 80 years of experience of serving students in Kittatinny, Hampton, and Glen Rock. You affected a lot of lives of a lot of students, and you affect them positively. So I'd like to thank you for your service. I hope if you're a new board member, you got some advice. And if you have that agenda, you know that you're going to have to work on that or eliminate your agenda and just work with everyone else. So that brings us to the end of this Education Matters. I hope you enjoyed listening to Eleanor and Rona.